I remember the novelty of being tucked into my sleeping bag next to my brothers and trying to fall asleep in the tent. Then it rained. It didn't just rain, it poured. Our campsite turned to muddy soup, and our tent, with us in it, got soaked. I remember a wet, cold sleeping bag. There was the overpowering odor of skunk spray over everything because during the night a skunk had wandered near the campsite and gotten startled. The odor clung to the moisture in the air and coated every breath we took as we dismantled our setup to pack it in our car and go home. I do not remember my father's temper tantrum or my mother's reaction to it. I'm sure the mortification of having that performance in front of our church family locked those memories into someplace very dark and hidden. But I do remember never ever wanting to be locked in a space that close to my family again, with no escape. And I never wanted to go camping again for as long as I lived. For the most part, I stuck by that decision. I do seem to remember an overnight with my boyfriend, probably somewhere around the age of 20 or so, where he tented in the woods outside a cabin community by a lake where his friend's parents had a cabin. I was miserable with a horrible stomachache because I refused to do anything but urinate outside. Then there was the trailer experience with husband number 2 during my brief expat to Ontario in 2006. His family owned several permanently situated camping trailers in a community by a lake in Ontario, Lake Perry. And our summer vacation was spent a week up there with his mother, father, and one of his brothers. Trinity was 3 at the time. The trailer was about 30 feet long, equipped with electricity and some water, but we were not supposed to use the toilet in the camper, so it was outhouses. Yes, actual outhouses, stationed a short walk away on one of the trails. I loathe outhouses with a passion. They really are a huge component of everything that is inherently wrong with the evolution of human intellect. Neither my husband nor his family was overly fond of me. I couldn't wait for that week to end. After that, it was a firm rule that if it wasn't equipped with the climate control, real beds, running water, and electricity, I would sooner die than participate. I stuck with that rule, too, until Haven's father decided to purchase a pop-up camper and drag all of us up to Lake George for a week to camp in a campground there. This was the summer before my suicide. Gestapo and I were not on friendly terms, and I couldn't imagine anything worse than playing house with him in the middle of the woods while stuck in a foldable tin can covered with mosquito netting. And then I died. I figured that was the definitive end of me getting dragged on camping adventures. I had always been a passionate environmentalist and conservationist, fascinated since childhood with simple earth-centered living that created homes out of natural materials like stone and hand-hewn wood, cooking and heating with fire and not depending on complex electronic technology and electricity for survival. I had grown up in a house where my father hunted for meat in the autumn. My mother tinkered with gardening and cooking our meals from scratch without purchasing or using many processed meals or ingredients. I also grew up in a home where the insecurity of paying for food, heat, and electricity constantly permeated the atmosphere of everything. We lived in New York, which meant our winters were cold and harsh, sometimes starting as early as October, and sometimes lasting well into March and April. We had considerable rainfall and humidity, which meant our living spaces were subject to the elements and destructive capabilities of that moisture. My mother always talked wistfully about the log cabin she would build, and my father sometimes fixated on the property he one day hoped to own and develop. I filled my head with all the Little House on a Prairie books and endless fiction and nonfiction accounts of what it was like to live in medieval Europe. From an excruciatingly young age, I saw the sustainability in simple living, and I convinced myself that it must be the hidden elixir of contentment that all of the adults around me were not just missing, but actively dismissing. That stuck with me in adulthood, this detachment from economically driven consumerism. But I did not have good boundaries or financial discipline developed in me. I also found myself aligning with partners I absolutely bankrupted myself in living with because They were so unhappy with me. My brain said, if you create a luxurious environment with comfort and ease, they will stop feeling so angry towards you. In many ways, I equated the abusive misery of my childhood with our own abject and chronic poverty. I've since matured that hypothesis into a much more logical, no, they are miserable and broken people, no matter what. But the financial instability did not help.